Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our studies of 1 Samuel. Today we're in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And as we read yesterday in our reading of the chapter, we have here in chapter 17 the very famous account of David and Goliath. And there are a lot of things that we could talk about here. We could get into a bunch of deep statements about the various intricacies of what takes place and about all of the various depths of describing the event and all of those things. But in our few moments today, I want to take the time and just go over some of the top layer of lessons, some of the overarching themes of what we see being illustrated in the account of David and Goliath. And so I want to do that by looking at three different things today. The first thing I want us to look at is found in verse number 11. When Goliath first comes out and he makes his charge, he makes his call to the Israelites for someone to come out and fight him, for a champion to come out and face him, the Israelites are filled with fear and doubt. Verse 11 says that when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now, fear in and of itself is not necessarily wrong, nor is it bad. A healthy dose of respectful fear is important in every aspect of our lives, from the standpoint of keeping us from doing things that are foolish, and also from the standpoint of pointing us in the right direction toward what is right. But that's not the kind of fear that is being discussed here. We're talking about a fear that is more of a terror and a dismay than it is any kind of a healthy fear. And this is the kind of fear that is faced when it is believed that something is impossible, or when it is believed that something has already been lost or defeated within the confines of the discussion. And that's the way Saul and his men are when it comes to Goliath. They are acting as though the battle is already lost. They are acting as though the fight has already been lost. They are already the captives of the Philistines. It is why for 40 days, Goliath is going to come out and make this particular charge, and nobody is going to step up. They have completely doubted their ability to be able to defeat the giant. They are intimidated by him. They are scared of him. And this is oftentimes the way that we deal with or people face various kinds of problems in their lives with fear and doubt. And when they do so, they are in many ways strangled from being able to do anything about it. They can't move forward. They don't want to run away. And so they just stand there day after day after day and watch as things progressively get worse, as the disheartening continues to grow. Because the longer that fear and doubt are allowed to remain, the more deeply rooted they become into the perception of truth. And so we see here at the start fear and doubt. But as we move deeper into the chapter, you find that fear and doubt doesn't just extend to themselves personally, but it is also going to extend to those around them. Because in verse number 33, when David says, "I will go and fight the Philistine," Saul responds by saying, "You are not able. It's not possible. We've all decided that we can't do it. We have all decided that we are not capable of defeating Goliath. And so if we are not capable, you certainly are not able to do it." It is oftentimes also the case that when we are overcome and when we are moored to the spot with fear and doubt, that we then also believe that nobody else can do what we have not been able to bring ourselves to do. And so we then try to inject that fear and that doubt into others. We try to tell others that if we can't do it, they certainly can't do it. People will do this many times in their spiritual lives when there is a problem that they either can't or will not overcome, and somebody else then is ready to step up and face that problem. The first thing that they hear is, you won't be able to succeed at that. I've tried it. I can't do it, and therefore you can't do it either. That is Saul's attitude toward David. Because Goliath is a man of war from his youth, and David is still a youth, there is no possible way that David can defeat Goliath. And that leads us into our third point. Because you drop down just a couple verses from there as David gives Saul his explanation of why he can defeat Goliath and why he will defeat Goliath. And you learn a third factor when it comes to dealing with issues and when it comes to facing our fears and our doubts, and that is having the courage to act requires trust. Now, many people will place their trust in many different things in order to gain courage. Sometimes people place their trust in their own abilities, in their own capabilities to be able to overcome and to be able to make it past whatever obstacle is in their way. Sometimes people put their trust in another. Sometimes people recognize that they don't have to do it alone and that they can't do it alone and that they can put their trust in somebody else to help them. That's what David does. David's trust is not just in himself, which is exactly where Saul and the other men of Israel's lack of trust was. They did not believe in their own abilities. They did not trust that they could do it themselves, and they might very well have been right. But they weren't alone. David makes the statement in verse 37. He says, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David's trust is not in himself. Unlike Saul, David is not just looking at himself when he discusses these things. He believes and he trusts in God. He believes that God will be there with him. He believes that God will help him, and he believes that God will give him the victory over Goliath, and he does. You see, when it comes to courage, courage is not about not having fear. Courage is not about being able to do something that nobody else can do. Courage is about trust. Courage is about trust that the fear can be overcome and having the willingness to put your trust where it should be. You know, God would tell people over the course of time, "Be strong and courageous, for I am with you." He was with David. He will be with us as well. If we are willing to have the courage to put our trust in him, to listen to him, and to do as he says, no matter who tells us you are not able, and no matter how big the problem may be, and how dreadful the fears may become. We have to be those who are like David. We have to be those who have the courage to trust in God. When we do that, we will have the courage to undertake anything that we face in this life. I hope that these things have been valuable to you. There are so many more things we could talk about from 1 Samuel chapter 17, but I believe this is the core of the lesson that is being illustrated to us here. And so I hope these things have been beneficial to you. Next time, Lord willing, we will come back and we will begin examining 1 Samuel chapter 18. But until then, have a great day.